Okay, you guys can follow along with me in your reading. Zoom in a little bit. Let's talk about growth charts. And I kind of started this the other day and then we ran out of time. So anyways, this is something I really want you guys to understand well. That's why I wanted to go back over it and not be in such a hurry. And anyways, kind of interesting. I think you guys will find it interesting, and then I'll let you guys kind of plot yourselves on a growth chart. Think about where you would be on the growth chart in a little bit. So look, just follow along with me. We're going to use this kidshealth.org. That's a really good website, by the way, if you guys ever have any questions. And they actually have a section that's for parents, for kids, and then for teens. And it's like everything under the sun. And this explains it really well and just does a good job doing that. Okay, so it says about growth charts. Here's the thing about kids, everybody grows at different rates. Our genetics make up a lot of what we end up shaped like, and as well as just environment, the things around us and our diet, and there's, if we're involved in athletics, all those things, if we have an illness or a disease, all these things affect our growth and our height and our stature. So everybody's different, and that's one of the things that's one of the reasons that growth charts are used, is because different people are different heights, and different heights can be normal for the same age, but there's still a range of what is normal and what's not. And so that's what growth charts kind of give us, that range, and tell us if kids are not growing as fast as they should be, and so forth. So anyways, just really interesting, I think, something to look at. This is one of the reasons, or one of the times whenever growth charts are really used in the kind of in the real healthcare world, is when kids are younger and they get well checks. So for example, Micah, so he had a well check like a week after he was born, and then he had another one at a month, and then he had one at 2 months and 4 months, and his next one will be at 6 months. And then I think we actually go, he may be a year before we go back. And so each of those times they check his weight, and they check his height, and they check the circumference around his head to make sure his head is growing the way it should be and not growing too fast, which means he could have fluid on his brain or something. So all those are things that they check, and they're just making sure that he's growing like he needs to be. Sometimes, especially as a new mom, it's really hard to tell if your child is growing normally or acting normally, because if you don't have anything to compare it to. And sometimes it's hard to tell if they're eating well or not eating well, especially like if you're breastfeeding, because you don't know how much milk they're getting. So that's what well checks are really good for, that they help prevent disease. Kids usually get their vaccines during those times. So anyway, so a growth chart is something that they would look at then, and they always tell me like what percentile my kids are in. So this is what growth chart reads. It says, why do doctors use growth charts? And I'll try to keep up on here. It says they're a standard part of any checkup, and they show how kids are growing compared with other kids of the same age and gender. Okay, so that's what growth charts are looking at. They're comparing this particular child to all the children, their same age, same gender. Okay, so for example, my child, Hannah, who is almost 3, if I plot her on a growth chart, okay, she's going to be on this other growth chart, but it's going to measure her against the average kind of, you want to think of it that way, of other kids that are also almost 3 and are a girl. It says they also allow doctors and nurses to see the pattern of kids' heights and weight gain over time, and if they're developing proportionately. Let's say a child is growing along the same pattern until they're 2 years old, and then suddenly started growing at a much slower rate than other kids. Okay, so let's say they've been growing along faster, fast, and all of a sudden they start slowing down a lot. That might indicate a health problem. It might not, but it might. Something at least they can look into. So doctors can see that by looking at a growth chart. says, if a growth chart shows a different pattern, is there a problem? Not necessarily. The doctor will interpret growth charts in the context of the child's overall well-being, environment, and genetic background. So they're going to look, okay, maybe this child is really, really tiny, but if both of their parents are short people or small people, they're probably not going to worry about it a whole lot. Because is the child meeting other developmental milestones? So just like what we were talking about the other day, there are other things developmentally. So yeah, they're 3. Is she trying to stand on, is she getting where she can speak more? Is she, can she run around and play? Is she coordinated and so forth? So those are other things. You kind of put everything together. Well, no, they're not growing and developmentally something's going on too. Then you put 2 and 2 together and figure out what's going on. How tall or heavy are the child's parents and siblings? Were they born prematurely? Premature babies can kind of mess up the growth chart because their age. If a baby's born 2 months early, okay, it's going to be hard to put them on a growth chart because when they were 1 month old, they were like a normal baby 1 month before they're even born. So that kind of makes for a, that can kind of mess things up a bit. Has a child started puberty earlier or later than average? Okay. If they've started puberty, usually boys especially will have a growth spurt. So that, when you get to that junior high age, there's kind of a wide range of normal. Okay, it says, are all kids on one growth chart? And the answer is no. So boys and girls have separate growth charts, and there's actually 2 separate ones. One is for babies, so 0 to 36 months. And then another set of charts is used for kids that are 2 to 20 years old. Say kids, not really kid when you get on upwards in there. And then there's special growth charts that are for other conditions that kids might have. Like it says, there's one for Down syndrome. Okay, so again, there's your normal one. Look at the birth to 36 months. We have boys' length and weight for age. So we look at their length and their weight. Girls' length and weight, and then head circumference. Like I said a while ago, they always measure head circumference is just right around their forehead. They measure around. And again, that's important. It can tell a few things. If their head is too small, they may be looking for like a bone issue. Maybe their bones are starting to fuse early or something. Or if they're too large, then that might be an indication that they have fluid on their brain. So, okay, it says what measurements are put on. So again, head circumference. Now with older kids, it says doctors measure weight, height, and body mass index. And we're going to read about body mass index here in a minute. It's important to look at and compare weight and height measurements to get a full picture. So BMI is really going to tell us more about your health once you get past that 2-year-old age than just straight height and weight, because there's so many different normals. It says, here it talks about the head circumference. So, for example, an unusually large head may be a sign of hydrocephalus, a buildup of fluid inside the brain, and then a head that's smaller than average may be a sign that the brain is not developing properly or has stopped growing, which obviously is an issue. Okay, so let's look at this next part, percentiles. And you guys definitely need to know and understand what a percentile is. That will be asked on the test. Now it says percentiles are measurements that show where a child is compared with others. On the growth charts, the percentiles are shown as lines and curved patterns. So I'm going to show you a picture of a growth chart in a second. Okay, but that's important. It's compared to other kids, same age, same gender. Okay, so a percentile is just a comparison. So when doctors plot a child's weight and height on the chart, they'll see which percentile line those measurements land on. The higher the percentile number, the bigger a child is compared with other kids of the same age and gender, whether it's for height or weight. The lower percentile number, the smaller a child is. For example, it says if a 4-year-old boy's weight is in the 10th percentile, that means that 10% of boys that same age weigh less than he does, and 90% weigh more. Okay, so let's say my child is in the 25th percentile. okay? What that means, if I've got Micah, let's say Micah's in the 25th percentile in weight. Okay, what that means is that 25th percentile, that means compared to other boys that are 5 months old, okay, he weighs more than 25% of other boys the same age. But he weighs less than 75% of other boys his age. Does that make sense? It's always in comparison to others. So when you see like 25th percentile, that's what it's talking about. Okay, if it's 50th percentile, then he would weigh more than 50% of other kids his age, and he would weigh less than 50% of other kids his age. So 50% is like kind of your average, right in the middle. Okay, if you have any questions, make sure and let me know. So I want you to understand that you need to be able to explain that on the test Friday. So you might read over that a couple more times. Okay, it says, how are percentiles determined? Excuse me. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention created the growth charts that are most commonly used in the United States and were last updated in 2000. After collecting growth measurements from thousands of U.S. children over a period of time, the CDC was able to show the range of these measurements on one chart, including the percentile curves. Okay, so they took thousands of kids' measurements, averaged them out, and that's how they got these ranges. Being in a high or low percentile does not necessarily mean that a child is healthier or has a growth or weight problem. Let's say that a 4-year-old boy who is in the 10th percentile for weight is also in the 10th percentile for height. So 10% of kids are shorter and weigh less than he does, and most kids, 90%, are taller and weigh more. That just means that he's smaller than average. I lost my spot. Which usually doesn't mean there's a problem. If his parents and siblings are also smaller than average and there's other signs that he's healthy and developing okay, then they're not gonna worry about it. Okay? Does that make sense? So it's just in comparison. So just because he's at the 10th percentile in height and weight doesn't mean that he's too small or that he's not growing. Okay? His height and weight are pretty similar in the percentile range, and that's something that you want to look for usually. And as long as he stays on that, he's going to be fine. So don't think that the numbers necessarily mean that there's a problem, okay? So 10th percentile is not bad, 90th percentile is not bad. It's just the way it is. I mean, at one point, Hannah, she was a pretty fat baby, but at one point, she was like 95th percentile. So, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't like she was just horribly overweight baby. Her height was like 85th percentile or something too, or maybe it was the other way around. But anyway, so she was just a big baby. It wasn't a big deal. They weren't going to be concerned for anything. But we'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, it says, what's the ideal percentile for my child? There's no one ideal number. Healthy children come in all shapes and sizes, and a baby who's in the 5th percentile can be just as healthy as a baby who's in the 95th percentile. Ideally, each child will follow along the same growth pattern over time, growing in height and gaining weight at the same rate, with the height and weight in proportion to one another. This means that usually a child stays on a certain percentile line on the growth curve. So let me show you. Oh, I heard somebody knocking at my door. Okay, so this is an example of a growth chart. Zoom out a little bit. This is 2 to 20, so this is like, you guys could use this actually for yours. This is stature and weight for age. Okay, so there's 2 different percentiles on here. Let's look at the stature one. So let's say I'm 19 years old. Okay. Here's 19 years old down here. Okay, it's this line right here. And let's say I am 5'3", which is 63 inches, which is about what I am. Okay, so 63 inches. I go over here, 63 is like right here. This one doesn't go up very high, does it? Okay. Come across, here's 19. If I was 19 years old, okay, I would be somewhere between the 25th and 50th percentile. So probably about the 30th, somewhere in there. Okay? Does that make sense? Everybody see these lines on here? these lines are the percentile lines. So you just go over here, you figure out your height, and down here your age, and then it's just like reading any other graph. You just pull those together and come across, put your dot on here where you meet, and that's about right. So that kind of tells you, oh, here's the rest of the heights on this side, so you can see. So I guess I could have gone this way. 63 inches, 19 years old, that's where mine would be. If I did weight, say I'm 19 years old and I weigh 120, okay? I'm going to go over here to I have kilograms in pounds. So 120 at 19 years old, it'd be probably around the 40th percentile right here. There's actually smaller lines so you can see the different percentiles, but anyway. But anyway, so that's what these curvy lines, these are the percentiles. There's no 100th percentile, it's just 97. So you can fall above that or you can fall below the third, but there's no specifics beyond that. So anyway, so that's what it's talking about with the percentile curve. Just wanted you guys to see that. If you guys just Google actually CDC growth chart, you can pull that same thing up if you want to plot yourself on there. Okay, let's look. What could signal a problem? Okay, it says a few different growth chart patterns might signal a health problem. So one example, it says when a child's weight or height percentile changes from a certain pattern it's been following. So let's say they've been growing, they've been running about the 20th, 25th percentile, 30th, pretty steadily, and then all of a sudden it drops or it, jumps. Says, for example, if the height and weight consistently are on the 60th percentile line until a child is 5, then the height drops to the 30th percentile at age 6, that might indicate that there's a growth problem because the child is not following his or her previous growth pattern. Many kids may show changes in growth percentiles at certain points in development when it's normal for growth rates to vary more from child to child. So this is particularly common during infancy and puberty. Micah has gained, he's gotten fat all of a sudden. So I expect at his 6-month appointment for his to jump up pretty good. Okay, another problem is when kids don't get taller at the same rate at which they're gaining weight. Says, let's say a boy's height is in the 40th percentile and his weight is in the 85th percentile. So he's taller than 40% of kids his age, but he weighs more than 85% of kids of his age. What that means is that, he's like average height, but he's probably a pretty chunky kid. Says that might be a problem. On the other hand, if he's in the 85th percentile for height and weight follows that pattern consistently over time, that usually means he's a normal child who's just larger than average. Okay, so 85th percentile is not bad for weight if he's, 75th percentile for height or 90th percentile for height. But being 85th percentile for weight and 40th percentile for height, again, that means he's got some weight issues and there's some other things going on. So that's growth charts. I would, again, really encourage you to look on these. If you guys want to, let me show you where I was. I just Googled CDC and growth charts, and I think it came up to this. And I just went to set 2 is the one that you guys would use for yourselves. And then you can go to here. So it's got girls, head circumference, weight for stature, BMI. So we'll look at that. But anyway, so you guys can go to this. Again, if you just Google CDC and growth charts, it'll come up to here. Okay, those of you guys who are in my class here in Cooper, I printed off these for you, the growth charts, and I want you guys to plot yourselves on there. Okay, I want you guys to plot yourselves on here. So one page is for boys and one page is for girls. So you guys can actually go and weigh yourself, get your height on the scale in the corner back there, and then I want you to plot yourselves on here. And if you have trouble doing that, I'll be back. So Okay, let's look at BMI. Find it. I think it's right here. Okay, BMI is body mass index is what this stands for. It's one of the biggest questions guys and girls have as they grow and develop is whether they're the right weight, right? The right weight. There's not really a norm. So one place to start is by learning about body mass index, or BMI, a calculation that estimates how much body fat a person has based on his or her height and weight. So BMI takes your height and your weight, and then it estimates the amount of body fat you have. BMI can help doctors identify people who are overweight and at risk of developing medical problems like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, or diabetes. And they can monitor their weight and make recommendations about how you need to eat or exercise and so forth. Okay, so there's actually a BMI calculator on here. If you guys go to this kidshealth.org, I thought actually it was just right here. Let's go find it. I thought it was right here. Let me back up. Okay, I guess if we go back to this where we were, oh wait. If you go to the parent one, go to search for BMI under parents, and it talks about calculating the BMI. And anyways, there's a calculator here. And you just put it in. So we'll say, let's say, I'm not going to put in my, well, I'll put in my info. I don't care. It may not go, we'll go back far enough because this one's just for kids. Okay, well, let's say I'm 20. Oh, I'm definitely not. Let's see. Okay, so oh, I don't think it liked. Let's go to 95. Okay, I had to be a little bit younger. Okay, so 46%. So it gives you your, here's my BMI. It says 21.3. That puts you in the 46th percentile, which indicates you're at a healthy weight. Okay. So here it gives you a healthy weight range. And then down here it gives you the percentile markers. Kind of tells you where you are in relation to other people, again, same age. So anyways, I'd really like for you guys to do that. Measure yourselves, weigh yourselves. You may have to go to the nurse's office or something and use her scale. If you guys can do that, or maybe you need to pick a different day. But BMI is really a good indicator of, am I a healthy weight for my size, for my height, am I not, and so forth. Anyways, pretty interesting. So that's that. That's a growth chart. You guys do need to understand, again, make sure you understand percentiles. Make sure you understand when there's a problem, okay? Not that the number itself is a problem, but that the difference in the numbers can be an issue. So that's that. And so I'll let you guys weigh yourself, get your height. I guess that's that.